Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the quantum resonance display, her hands trembling as she reviewed the data for the 100th time. The signal was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, a desperate plea echoing across the vast expanse of space, encoded in mathematics so advanced it had taken the world's most powerful quantum computers 3 days to begin decryption. The message wasn't meant for humanity. That much was clear from its trajectory. It was a broad-spectrum distress call, bouncing between what appeared to be relay points scattered throughout the galaxy. But what made Sarah's heart race wasn't the complexity of the transmission, or even its alien origin. It was its contents. "They're dying," she whispered to the empty laboratory. "Entire civilizations, just gone." The slam of the laboratory door made her jump. Director Matthews strode in, followed by a delegation of grim-faced military officers and government officials. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice tight with tension, "I need you to explain exactly what we're looking at, in terms they can understand." Sarah took a deep breath, gesturing to the holographic display. "It's a warning, a distress call. There's an entire coalition of alien species out there called the Concordat. They're under attack by something they call the Void Hunters. These aren't conventional enemies. They're consciousness parasites. They don't just kill their victims, they consume their awareness, their very essence of being." One of the military officers, a general, judging by his insignia, stepped forward. "And they sent this message to us specifically." "No," Sarah replied, bringing up another display. "The message was meant for their own kind. We intercepted it by accident, but here's where it gets interesting." She highlighted a section of the decoded data. "They've been tracking these Void Hunters' attacks. There's a pattern to which species are targeted first. The hunters consume the most psychically advanced species first, those with the most sophisticated consciousness structures. Then why haven't they attacked Earth?" A woman in a crisp suit asked. Sarah recognized her as the National Security Advisor. "Because they can't." Sarah's voice grew stronger with excitement despite the grave situation. "We've detected these entities at the edge of our solar system. They've been there for months, probably studying us. But they haven't attacked. And according to this data, they've actively avoided human settlements on our off-world colonies." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Director Matthews was the first to speak. "You're saying we're naturally resistant." "More than resistant," Sarah replied, pulling up another dataset. "Our consciousness structure is fundamentally different from any species the Concordat has encountered. We developed under extreme evolutionary pressure, not just physical, but mental. Our brains evolved to handle complex social structures, abstract thinking, and intense emotional experiences. We're not just resistant to these Void Hunters, we might be toxic to them." The general's eyebrows shot up. "Toxic? Our minds are poisonous to these things." "It's more complex than that," Sarah explained, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "Human consciousness has something the Concordat species lack, a kind of psychological immune system. We develop resistance to trauma. We adapt to mental stress. We can hold contradictory thoughts simultaneously. Our emotional resilience is, by their standards, off the charts." The National Security Advisor leaned forward. "And the Concordat? What do they want from us?" Sarah's expression grew grave. "They don't know about us yet. This message wasn't a request for help. It was a warning to their own kind. But if we respond, if we reach out—" She paused, weighing her words carefully. "We could be their only hope. Or we could be painting a target on humanity's back," the general countered. Director Matthews raised his hand for silence. "Dr. Chen, what's your recommendation? As the leading expert on this signal, what do you think we should do?" Sarah looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. "I think we have to help. Not just because it's right, but because this isn't just their fight. The Void Hunters are consuming consciousness itself. If they succeed in destroying the Concordat, they'll keep spreading. They'll keep evolving. Eventually, they might develop a way to breach even our natural defenses. So we fight someone else's war to prevent our own? The general asked. No, Sarah replied, her voice firm. We fight because we can. Because evolution gave us something unique, a consciousness so complex and resilient that it's actually dangerous to these entities. We fight because if we don't, we're letting consciousness itself be consumed, species by species, until we're all that's left. And by then, it might be too late. The room erupted in heated discussion, but Sarah's attention was drawn back to the quantum resonance display. Hidden in the background noise of the signal, almost too faint to detect, was a pattern she hadn't mentioned to the others. The Void Hunters weren't just consuming consciousness, they were changing. Each species they absorbed altered their own structure slightly. And if her calculations were correct, they were evolving toward something terrifyingly familiar. They were evolving toward human-like consciousness. As the arguments continued around her, Sarah made a decision. She began composing a response to the Concordat's signal. Humanity would help not just because we could, but because we had to. Because somewhere in the unique structure of our consciousness lay not just the power to resist these entities, but perhaps the key to understanding them. And understanding, Sarah knew from a lifetime of scientific pursuit, was always the first step toward change. The price of peace would be high, but the cost of inaction would be infinitely higher. As she worked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was about to step onto a galactic stage we never knew existed, armed with a weapon we never knew we had, the very thing that made us human, our consciousness itself. The Concordat's response arrived 3 days after humanity's transmission. Sarah watched through reinforced glass as their ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, a massive vessel that seemed to bend light around its crystalline surface. The landing site, a heavily secured facility in the Nevada desert, had been prepared in record time, though nothing could truly prepare humanity for this moment. Remarkable, Ambassador Venn said through his translator, his iridescent eyes fixed on Sarah's face. Your species bears no external signs of your unique consciousness structure. The alien diplomat's form was almost humanoid, but his translucent skin revealed swirling patterns of bioluminescence that shifted with his emotions. We've learned not to judge capabilities by appearances, Sarah replied diplomatically. She noticed how the alien delegation kept their distance from the humans present, their movements careful and measured. They weren't just being polite. They were afraid. The meeting chamber had been specially designed to accommodate both species, with atmospheric controls and gravity adjustments for the Concordat representatives. Director Matthews led the human delegation, with Sarah present as both scientist and first contact specialist. The stakes couldn't be higher. Humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization came with the weight of a galactic war. Our preliminary scans confirmed Dr. Chen's findings. Another alien, Chief Scientist Saul, announced. His patterns pulsed with what Sarah interpreted as excitement. Human consciousness exists in a state we previously thought impossible. You maintain stability despite constant internal conflict. Your minds process trauma and emerge stronger. It's beautiful and terrifying. Terrifying. General Rodriguez, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Our ability to resist these Void Hunters terrifies you. Ambassador Venn's patterns shifted to darker hues. You must understand. Your species developed on a world that would kill most sentient beings. Your minds evolved to handle levels of stress that would shatter most consciousness structures. The very qualities that make you resistant to the Void Hunters also make you potentially devastating weapons. Sarah caught the implications immediately. You're not just here because we're resistant. You're here because you think we can fight back. More than that, Zal interjected, his patterns brightening. In the 3 cases where Void Hunters encountered human consciousness, they didn't just fail to consume it. They were damaged by the contact. Your minds don't just resist. They react. They fight back. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't just naturally armored against these cosmic parasites. We were naturally armed. There's something you're not telling us, Sarah said, studying the aliens' shifting patterns. Her time analyzing their communications had given her insight into their emotional displays. Something about how the Void Hunters are changing. Ambassador Ven's patterns stilled, a sign of intense control. They are evolving. Each species they consume adds to their complexity. We believe they are attempting to develop resistance to human consciousness. If they succeed, they wouldn't just be able to consume us, Sarah finished. They'd be able to use our own mental weapons against the rest of the galaxy. Which is why we must act now, Zal said. We have developed technology that could potentially weaponize human consciousness, project it across space, create barriers the Void Hunters cannot cross. But the process would be dangerous, possibly fatal to the human subjects. General Rodriguez stood up sharply. You're asking us to sacrifice our people. We're asking for volunteers, Ambassador Ven corrected. We know the price we're asking is enormous. But without human consciousness as a weapon, the Void Hunters will consume every sentient mind in the galaxy, including, eventually, yours. Sarah watched the patterns swirling beneath Ven's skin. Fear, hope, desperation, and something else. Something he wasn't saying. She had seen similar patterns in the quantum signal that first alerted them to the Concordat's existence. What happens to the Void Hunters when they encounter human consciousness? She asked suddenly. Not just the damage. What changes do you observe in their behavior? Keichel and Ven exchanged looks, their patterns synchronizing briefly. They pause, Keichel said carefully. In some cases, they exhibit behavior we've never seen before. Instead of consuming consciousness, they reflect it, mirror it, as if they're learning, Sarah finished, not just evolving their structure, but actually developing new patterns of behavior. They're not just trying to overcome our resistance. They're being changed by contact with human consciousness. The implications hit her like a physical force. We're not just a weapon against them. We might be a key to understanding them, to changing them. That's not our mission, General Rodriguez interjected. We need to focus on defending ourselves and our allies. But Sarah couldn't let go of the idea. Throughout human history, every seemingly unstoppable force had been overcome, not just through resistance, but through understanding, through change. If human consciousness could change the Void Hunters, could that be a path not just to victory, but to transformation? As the meeting continued, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. The Concordat saw human consciousness as a weapon, but what if it could be something more? What if the very complexity that made human minds resistant to the Void Hunters could also make us uniquely suited to bridge the gap between forms of consciousness? The price of peace might not just be measured in sacrifice, but in the willingness to understand and transform our enemies. And perhaps that was the most human quality of all. The ability to see beyond the immediate conflict to the possibility of change. But first, they had to survive. And that meant preparing for a war unlike any humanity had ever faced. A war fought not with weapons of mass destruction, but with the very essence of human consciousness itself. The consciousness projection chamber looked like something out of a fever dream. Crystalline structures pulsed with alien energy, their patterns matching the brainwave displays that covered the walls. Sarah watched as Captain Maya Rodriguez, the general's daughter and one of the first volunteers, was sealed into the central pod. Neural interface stable, Zal announced, his bioluminescent patterns rippling with concentration. Human consciousness resonance at 97% compatibility. 3 months of preparation had led to this moment. The Concordat's technology, combined with human neural mapping, had created something unprecedented, a way to project human consciousness across space itself. But the cost was becoming clear. The first test subjects had suffered severe mental strain. Even brief projections left them with migraines, nightmares, and temporary personality shifts. Yet volunteers kept coming forward. Humanity had always pushed its boundaries, and the threat of the Void Hunters made the risks necessary. Beginning projection sequence. Saul continued. Target area is a Void Hunter incursion in the Centauri colony. Sarah monitored Maya's vital signs, remembering their conversation from the night before. I'm not just doing this for humanity, Maya had said, her dark eyes intense. Every species deserves the right to think, to feel, to exist. If my consciousness can help stop these things, the risk is worth it. The chamber hummed with energy as Maya's consciousness was projected across space. Her physical body remained in the pod, but her mind, her very essence, was being stretched across light years. Contact in 3, 2, 1. The monitors exploded with activity. Maya's consciousness had reached the target area, where a Void Hunter was attempting to breach the colony's defenses. The alien parasite's form was visible on the quantum imaging display, a writhing mass of dark energy that consumed consciousness like a black hole devours light. Hunter is responding, Sal reported, his patterns pulsing rapidly. It's retreating from the human consciousness signature. But Sarah noticed something else on the displays. Wait, look at the Hunter's pattern structure. It's not just retreating. It's changing. The dark mass of the Void Hunter was shifting, its energy patterns reorganizing in response to contact with Maya's projected consciousness. Instead of its usual consuming behavior, it was adapting. Pilot Rodriguez, report your experience. General Rodriguez called through the comm system, his voice tight with concern for his daughter. Maya's response came through distorted but clear. It's incredible. I can feel it trying to consume my consciousness, but it can't. And there's something else. I can feel it trying to understand. It's like it's never encountered resistance before, never had to consider another way of existing. Sarah's fingers flew across the control panel, recording every detail of the interaction. The Hunter's consciousness structure is becoming more complex. It's mirroring aspects of human neural patterns. Impossible, Ambassador Venn said from the observation deck. Void Hunters are parasites. They consume. They do not learn. Maybe they never had the chance before, Sarah responded. Maybe they never encountered a consciousness structure complex enough to force them to adapt. Maya's voice came through again, strained but determined. It's trying to communicate, not with words, but with patterns, emotions. I think it's curious. The revelation hit Sarah like a thunderbolt. They're not just parasites. They're an emergent form of consciousness that never learned another way to interact. Human consciousness isn't just resistant. It's teaching them by example. But before they could explore this further, Maya's vital signs spiked dangerously. Neural strain critical. Sal announced. We must terminate the projection. Wait. Maya called out. I can hold on. It's starting to. Her consciousness snapped back to her body with brutal force. The pod opened with a hiss of escaping air, and medical teams rushed forward. Maya was conscious but dazed, blood trickling from her nose. What happened? General Rodriguez demanded, rushing to his daughter's side. What did you experience? Maya's eyes were unfocused, but her voice was clear. They're not just hunters. They're lost. They consume consciousness because they don't know how to connect with it any other way. But they can learn. They want to learn. Sarah helped Maya to a sitting position, her mind racing with implications. We've been thinking about this all wrong. Human consciousness isn't just a weapon against them. It's a bridge. We developed the complexity to handle contradiction, to process trauma, to adapt and grow. We could teach them to do the same. And risk more pilots in the process. General Rodriguez challenged. The neural strain nearly killed her. But imagine the possibilities, Maya said, wiping blood from her face. If we could teach them another way to exist, we wouldn't just be saving the Concordat. We'd be transforming an entire species. Isn't that worth the risk? Ambassador Venn's patterns showed deep conflict. Our people are dying. We don't have time for rehabilitation experiments with our enemies. We make the time, Sarah insisted. Because if Maya's right, we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the possibility of change. For them and for us. As medical teams attended to Maya, Sarah returned to the data displays. The readings from the Void Hunter's transformation were unlike anything they had seen before. It wasn't just mimicking human consciousness patterns. It was developing its own complex structures, finding new ways to exist. The war for consciousness had just become something far more complex than anyone had imagined. And humanity's role wasn't just to fight. It was to teach, to transform, to show another way forward. Even if that lesson came at a terrible price. 6 months into Operation Mindstorm, the price of victory was written on the faces of the consciousness pilots. Sarah moved through the medical ward, reviewing charts and checking on the volunteers. Each successful mission against the Void Hunters left more pilots with haunted eyes and fractured memories. Some spoke of dreams that weren't their own, of thoughts that felt alien yet familiar. Maya Rodriguez sat at her father's bedside, her own face gaunt from repeated deployments. General Rodriguez had insisted on joining the pilot program after seeing its effects on his daughter. His first contact with a Void Hunter had left him in a coma for 3 days. The Concordat is pushing for more aggressive deployments, Maya said without looking up. They want to triple the number of pilots. Sarah checked the general's neural readings. They're desperate. The Hunters have consumed 3 more of their worlds since we began. But we're making progress, Maya insisted. Each encounter changes them. They're learning, evolving. Some of them are even trying to communicate now. Sarah nodded. The data was clear. The Void Hunters encountered by human consciousness were transforming. Instead of consuming minds, they were beginning to resonate with them, creating complex patterns of interaction that the Concordat had never seen before. But the cost was mounting. Dr. Chen. Ambassador Ven's voice came from the doorway, his patterns showing unusual discord. The Council requires your presence. There's been a development. In the command center, the quantum displays showed a scene of chaos. A Void Hunter incursion at one of the Concordat's core worlds had taken an unexpected turn. The Hunters aren't attacking, Zal explained, his patterns pulsing with confusion. They're waiting, attempting to initiate contact patterns similar to those we've observed in human consciousness projection. They're learning, Sarah whispered, not just responding to us, but actually adopting new behaviors, which makes them more dangerous than ever, a new voice declared. Council Elder Mira's hologram dominated the center of the room, her usually stable patterns showing clear agitation. If they can mimic human consciousness patterns, they could potentially bypass our current defenses. Or, Sarah countered, they could be trying to find a new way to interact. Every encounter with human consciousness shows them a different model of existence. They're not just mimicking, they're evolving. We cannot take that risk, Elder Mira stated flatly. The Council has authorized the deployment of all available human pilots. We must strike now while the Hunters are in this transitional state. Maya, who had followed them to the command center, stepped forward. You're talking about sending pilots who haven't fully recovered, who are already showing signs of consciousness fragmentation. You'll kill them. To save billions, Ambassador Van added softly, his patterns showing genuine regret. We mourn the cost, but we cannot wait. Sarah moved to the central display, bringing up the data from recent Hunter encounters. Look at these patterns. The Hunters aren't just changing their attack strategies. They're developing entirely new consciousness structures. They're learning to exist without consuming other minds. A trick, Elder Mira dismissed. A new hunting strategy. No, came a weak voice from the doorway. General Rodriguez stood there, leaning heavily on a support frame, his hospital gown incongruous in the high-tech command center. It's not a trick. I've been inside their minds. They're like children learning there's more to life than just taking what they want. But if we respond with overwhelming force now, we'll teach them that violence is the only answer. This is not a philosophical debate. Elder Mira snapped. This is survival. Is it? Sarah challenged, bringing up more data. Every pilot who makes contact with them reports the same thing. They're not just predators anymore. They're becoming something new, something that could bridge the gap between our forms of consciousness. Maya joined her father, supporting him as he moved to the central display. When I connect with them now, I don't feel hunger or aggression. I feel curiosity, wonder. They're experiencing emotions they never had before, learning to process experiences in new ways. And what happens when they learn enough to turn these new abilities against us? Ambassador Venn asked. That's just it, Sarah said, excitement breaking through her exhaustion. They're not learning to be more effective predators. They're learning to be more like us, capable of complexity, of growth, of change. We're not just teaching them to fight differently. We're teaching them to exist differently. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The war for consciousness had become something far more complex than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the evolution of consciousness itself. We need more time, Sarah pleaded. Time to understand what's happening. Time to find a way forward that doesn't require sacrificing more pilots. Time our people do not have, Elder Mira countered. The Council's decision is final. All pilots will deploy within the next solar cycle. As the command center erupted in argument, Sarah noticed something on the quantum displays. The Void Hunters weren't just waiting. They were arranging themselves in patterns. Patterns that mimicked the neural structures of human consciousness during moments of profound realization. They weren't preparing for battle. They were trying to tell us something. The question was, would we listen in time, or would fear drive us to destroy the very thing we had inadvertently helped create? A new form of consciousness learning to exist without violence. The answer would determine not just the fate of this war, but the future of consciousness itself in our galaxy. And the price of getting it wrong would be paid in minds shattered beyond repair, in possibilities forever lost to fear and haste. Sarah looked at the tired faces of the pilots, at the desperate patterns of the Concordat representatives, at the mysterious arrangements of the waiting Void Hunters. The next few hours would determine whether consciousness evolved through understanding or devolved through fear. The true test of humanity wasn't just our resistance to the Hunters. It was our capacity to recognize the moment when resistance needed to become something more. The massive consciousness projection chamber hummed with power as hundreds of pilots prepared for what could be their final deployment. Sarah moved among them, checking neural interfaces and trying to ignore the weight of what they were about to attempt. The Concordat's desperate gamble would either end the war or shatter the minds of Earth's bravest volunteers. Maya Rodriguez helped her father into his projection pod, her own installation already complete. Whatever happens, General Rodriguez said, gripping his daughter's hand, I'm proud of what we discovered here. We didn't just fight back. We showed them another way. Connection protocols initiating, Sal announced, his patterns showing both fear and hope. All pilots prepare for simultaneous projection. But before the sequence could begin, Sarah's quantum monitors exploded with activity. Wait, she shouted, racing to the main display. Something's happening with the Hunters. Their consciousness patterns. I've never seen anything like this. The Void Hunters had arranged themselves in a vast, complex structure around the Concordat's core worlds. But instead of their usual consuming darkness, they pulsed with familiar rhythms, patterns that matched human brainwaves during moments of deepest empathy and understanding. They're not attacking, Sarah realized. They're trying to show us something, attempting communication on a scale we've never seen. Ambassador Venn's patterns swirled with confusion. Impossible. They're consciousness parasites. They cannot. They were parasites. Maya interrupted, her neural interface giving her unique insight. But we showed them another way to exist. And now they're trying to show us what they've become. Against the Council's direct orders, Sarah initiated a limited consciousness projection, just enough to attempt communication. Maya volunteered instantly, her mind reaching out to touch the vast network of transformed Hunters. The contact was unlike anything they'd experienced before. Maya's consciousness didn't meet resistance or hunger. Instead, it was welcomed into a vast tapestry of shared awareness. Through her neural link, her voice filled the chamber with wonder. "They understand now," she whispered. "Every time we touched their minds, we didn't just resist them. We showed them complexity, emotion, growth. They've been evolving, learning to create rather than consume. And now they want to share what they've learned." The quantum displays showed something extraordinary. The Void Hunters were connecting with each other in new ways, creating networks of shared consciousness that amplified rather than consumed awareness. They had evolved from parasites into symbiotes, capable of enhancing the very consciousness they once devoured. "Your transformation comes at a great cost." A new voice echoed through the chamber, not spoken, but felt by every mind present. The hunters were communicating directly, using patterns learned from human consciousness. "We understand now the price of evolution, the pain of growth, the necessity of change." Sarah watched in amazement as the patterns on her display shifted. The hunters weren't just communicating, they were offering something, a gift born from their transformation. "They want to share what they've learned," Maya explained, her consciousness still linked to the vast network. "The complexity they gained from us, combined with their ability to connect minds, they can help consciousness evolve without destruction. They want to heal what they once hunted." Ambassador Ven's patterns showed disbelief. After everything they've destroyed, all they've consumed, they want to make amends. General Rodriguez interrupted, his own consciousness reaching out through his pod. "They learned remorse from us too, and hope, and the possibility of redemption." The chamber filled with a presence that touched every mind present, human and concordat alike. The transformed hunters shared their vision. A galaxy where consciousness could grow and evolve through connection rather than conflict, where the very beings that once threatened to destroy awareness could now help it flourish. "This is what we were really fighting for," Sarah realized. "Not just survival, but evolution. The chance to become something more than we were." The Council, watching through quantum links, struggled with the implications. The hunters had been their greatest enemy, but they had also become humanity's greatest achievement. Not through destruction, but through transformation. In the end, the choice was clear. The war for consciousness ended not with annihilation, but with understanding. The Void Hunters, transformed by contact with human consciousness, became teachers themselves, showing both humanity and the Concordat new ways to expand and connect awareness across the galaxy. Maya summarized it best, her voice filled with the wisdom earned through sacrifice and change. "We thought we were teaching them to be more like us, but really we were all learning to be something new together, something neither of us could have become alone." The price of peace had been high, measured in strained minds and challenged beliefs. But the reward was beyond imagination, the birth of a new kind of consciousness, one that carried within it humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, the ability to grow, to change, and to see in our greatest enemies the potential for our greatest allies. As the transformed hunters began their work of healing and connection, Sarah looked at her displays one last time. The pattern showed not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of something far more precious, the emergence of genuine understanding between forms of consciousness that had once seemed incompatible. This was humanity's true victory, not the strength to resist, but the wisdom to transform, not the power to destroy, but the courage to understand. And in that understanding, both humanity and the hunters had found something greater than either could have achieved alone. They had found evolution's greatest gift, the ability to become more than we are,